little bit. So therefore, um, they they're not going to be. You're saying that they're dominating is incorrect because some of them fail, and I don't accept that argument. Therefore, any male advantage that is retained after transition should not be considered an unfair advantage. That's the argument. The observations that trans women are often beaten by females, which is true, or that no trans woman has ever qualified for the Olympics, but that's because there's no mechanism that exists to determine the veracity of that statement, and it's going to change in 2020 anyway, so that statement can be thrown out. They seem to support the central claim. So in what sense can a trans woman who doesn't win or perhaps even qualify for female sports competitions be deemed to have an unfair advantage? And that's what this person seeks to answer. By the way, this is at Fond of Beatles. She's a doctor who is on Twitter at that handle, at Fond of Beatles. Okay. Take a female athlete who pumps herself full of androgens, trains 8 hours a day, every day, recovers well, builds large muscle mass, and consequently boosts her 100-meter sprint from a natural 12 seconds to an enhanced 11 seconds. Think about that. I got to take a quick break because the music's playing. This is the Sam Sorbo Show on YouTube, on Mike Online, on mojo50.com. I'll be right back. Hello, Phil.
Hey, how are you?
It's great to see you. So we are live on YouTube right now. And if you'll back away from your camera just a wee bit.
Oh, wait, how's that?
That's better.
All right.
And then as soon as we hear the music playing, I'll bring you on and we'll have a conversation. I'm looking forward to it.
All right, great.
All right, welcome back to the program. I'm going to finish up on that tweet thread that I was telling you about. I didn't time that very well. But before I do have a guest that we're going to chat with right now. Phil Kerpen joins me. He is an American free market policy analyst and a political organizer. He's the president of American Commitment, which is a conservative 501c4 organization. He founded it in 2012. And he also served with as the vice president of Americans for Prosperity. Welcome to the program.
Hey, Sam, great to be with you.
So what are we talking about today?
You know, I thought you wanted to talk about drug pricing, but
I
whatever
do.
you want to talk about is fine with me.
No, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about Milton Friedman. This is off of an article that Phil wrote for AmericanCommitment.org. Milton Friedman opposed drug reimportation. This is the big push that we're seeing on Capitol Hill. They're trying to say, hey, drugs are too expensive and they're cheaper abroad, so we should just bring in the drugs from abroad, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of support for this now across the political spectrum. President Trump is proposing it. Bernie Sanders is for it. So it's pretty rare to have those two guys agree on anything. And there's also been a debate sort of inside conservatism on this because you've got people like Art Laffer and Club for Growth who say, hey, this is a free trade issue. We should be able to buy from Canada. And then on the other side, you have a lot of conservatives who say, well, they have price controls in Canada, and if we're buying at government set prices from Canada, we're going to have all the same problems as if we adopted our own price controls. You're going to have shortages, you're going to have a shortfall of R&D, and you're going to have kind of all the reasons you don't want to have government setting prices. You're going to sort of import that along with the imported drugs. And so I was kind of wondering, Sam, like, where was Milton Friedman on this debate? Because when there's a debate among conservatives, it's good to look to like, our greatest economic mind and whether he addressed the issue. And I found this interview he did back in, I think, 2003 or so. And it was really interesting because he actually didn't take either of those two sides. He said they were both wrong. He said it's not an issue of price controls and it's not an issue of free trade. He said the reason that reimportation is a bad idea is because it violates the patent of the company that spends at the time, $800 million. Now it's more like $2.5 billion. So it's already it's more than tripled in the 15 years since he did this interview, which is kind of interesting. But the point that he made is, look, if it costs a huge amount of money to bring a new drug to market, to do the R&D, and to go through that whole extensive years-long FDA approval process, we've got to have a system that makes it possible to pay for all of that R&D and all of that FDA testing and get a return on investment. And the way we do that in the United States is we issue a patent. And the essence of what a patent is the right to exclude competition. And if you tell a company, hey, you can't exclude competition from your own drug coming in from another country at a lower price, that undercuts the ability to make that return on capital, to justify that R&D. And what Milton Friedman said is, look, we could have other systems. You could imagine other systems to pay for these costs. But in the system we have, the patent is the key to doing that. And reimportation undercuts the value and the validity of that patent. And therefore, it's a bad idea. And I thought this was a really interesting argument that I didn't see anyone making. And so that's why I did this column where I just kind of, it was a bit of a cheat of a column because it's just big quotes from Milton Friedman. But I thought it was kind of important to get that out there.
That works.
Kind of
bring Milton back. Why not?
Yeah.
But you're right. But here's the thing: we're not thinking about this correctly at all. Because here's the thing: the meta question is inequality good?
Generally speaking, yes, but in economics, not always. And what I mean by that is sometimes you have a situation in economics where price discrimination is actually rational. Where let's say that a company does have a monopoly because they have a patent or for some other reason, and they've got some customers who are willing to pay a lot, and so they charge them a lot. They've got other customers who maybe can't afford that, and they charge them lower prices because the alternative is that they wouldn't sell to them at all. That can actually be economically rational, and that's kind of what Milton Friedman is suggesting is the situation here with drug pricing is, if the foreign government is saying we'll pay this much and no more, it's actually in the interests of the drug companies and even of U.S. consumers for them to say, yeah, we'll take your price because, even though we make more kind of from richer U.S. consumers are willing to pay a full price, it's better to get something and make those sales and make some money than to not make the sales at all. And so it's one of those results in economics that's actually a little bit counterintuitive, but price discrimination can actually be rational and beneficial.
So the idea is that okay. So the first idea is inequality good? And the general answer, the meta answer is yes, because it's only through this kind of inequality that we are going to develop these drugs in the first place. For instance, they developed a flat screen TV. And the first flat screen TV, the first huge flat screen TV was tens of thousands of dollars. And there was only one guy in the whole town who could afford one. But He got one because he was wealthy and he could afford one. But now you can buy two or three for under, whatever. They're hundreds of dollars now. So the point is that inequality was good because they had the impetus to make the really expensive version and then it got dumbed down and it got cheaper to make it. And so, and because of the inequality, the economy is spurred into this kind of action. And it's the same thing with drugs. So do you
It's
want,
actually even
should we
more
just
extreme.
put a, right, it's more extreme. And
It's
I'll
even
let
more
you,
extreme
I'll
for
let
drugs
you,
because the
yeah.
first pill can cost, $2.5 billion
Right,
to create and get to market. The next pill costs 10
right,
cents. Well, but you can't price the second through infinite pill based on the production cost because you need to figure out a way to get your
right.
capital back
To
and your
make the
return on
first
investment
pill.
of getting that first one and getting it approved and through the FDA process.
So, and this is the same argument that I make against one payer healthcare system, healthcare, right?
Yeah.
If we're happy with healthcare the way it is today, and we don't want any more innovation, we don't have any more diseases that we want to cure, we don't want to do any more research, we don't need to develop any more drugs. We're tapped out, we're maxed out at the number of drugs that we have. They're all working great, and we're perfect now. Then yeah, let's just open up the system to a single payer. There won't be any competition. There won't be any drive to innovate or make anything better. And of course, the end result is everything will slowly spiral downhill until there is no health care.
Yeah, well, it's one of the things, one of the reasons that drug pricing is such a vexing issue is the rest of the world, to a large extent, does get a free ride off of us. And it's not just the issue I was talking about price discrimination sometimes being rational, because you've got government policies, market interventions. And, I have no problem in principle or in practice with poor countries paying little or nothing for drugs. That makes sense to me. But when you have European countries and Canada and Japan with very low government set prices, it basically means that America is carrying the burden
Yes.
of medical innovation and R&D and the development of new cures for the world. And these other countries are getting a free ride off of us. And we really should make strenuous efforts in the trade context to get other countries, other rich countries, to loosen their price controls, because we would get a lot more cures if there's the potential to get market returns on them globally. And there was one study I saw that if the other rich countries, the OECD countries, loosened their price controls, we would get 10 to 12 more drugs per year invented and discovered and brought to market. Think about what those might do, what they might do. Yeah, think about what those drugs might be, what they might do. You can't even imagine. It could make a huge impact on quality of life and life expectancy and everything worldwide. So that is a big policy problem, but how do you solve it? You don't solve it by saying we're just going to link our prices to theirs, because then instead of them getting a free ride off of us, there's no R&D going on, no medical innovation, no ride for anyone to get a free ride off of.
Right. You're removing incentive then.
Yeah.
And that's the wrong way to go.
Somehow convince these countries to loosen their price controls in trade negotiations, but you can imagine how tough that is because the politics of it on their side, and that's why it's been so hard. But I mean, this bill, the Nancy Pelosi bill, this HR 3 bill that she's introduced on drug pricing, is the biggest step towards a total government takeover of the healthcare system we've ever seen. Seriously, I think it's actually in some ways more extreme than the Bernie Sanders just take over all of healthcare immediately thing, because Nancy Pelosi's bill is a much greater threat of actually passing. And what she does for drug pricing is her bill says, look, the 250 most popular drugs in the country, the government is just going to set the price as whatever they want it to be. And the drug company has to take the government price, or else they'll be hit with a 95% tax. Now, a 95% of total sales, not of profit. So if you're telling a company, basically, we're going to tax you 95% of your total sales if you don't accept the government price, they have to accept the government price, or they're basically going to be out of business. And so her bill is straight up government price setting. It would crush the private sector R&D and the incentive for innovation, developing and discovering new cures. And then you have to ask this question. The pharmaceutical industry spends about $200 billion a year on R&D. What are you going to replace that with? You're going to come up somehow with a new tax that's $200 billion and try to do it in government at the NIH summit? Just the numbers wouldn't work, even if the government were as good at it as these companies, which it's not even close. And so this is very, very dangerous to sort of use the discontent there is about drug prices, which of course I understand. I've had to buy very expensive drugs for my own family members. So I certainly relate to the concerns people have about this. But these are solutions that are much, much worse than the problem they're trying to address. And frankly, Sam, the most important thing I would love to see government do, which unfortunately the Trump administration backed off of, was this idea of getting rid of the anti-kickback exemption for the pharmaceutical benefit managers. Because what's happening in this country right now is you've got these PBMs and the insurance companies that have sort of consolidated all of the big all of the big pharmacy chains all over the country, and they're negotiating with the manufacturers sort of with this huge amount of purchasing power, but they're not using it to lower prices. They're actually using it to demand higher prices. And what they're telling the manufacturers is, you can raise your price anytime you want, but you better not cut your price. OptumRx, which is the PBM of United Health, actually sent a letter to the manufacturer saying, you have to give us 7 quarters notice, almost 2 years of notice, anytime you want to cut your prices. But you can raise them anytime. Why are they doing that? Because they get a percentage of the price, so they make more money with higher prices rather than lower. And instead of asking for lower prices, they ask for larger rebates, but they don't pass the rebates on at the point of sale. And so you've got this huge diversion of funds to these middlemen, to these PBMs, and it would be a violation of federal law, at least in Medicare Part B and Part D and other government programs, except they have an exemption from the anti-kickback statute. So Trump had proposed this idea of, let's get rid of that exemption. Let's say any rebates have to be passed on to customers. And if you did that, the effective price that you pay would be a lot less, because you'd be getting the rebate instead of the insurance company or the PBM taking it out. But it wouldn't affect the incentive for R&D and cures, because the manufacturer would be getting the same amount of money. And so I thought that was a great, great policy proposal. But when you're threatening to take money away from insurance companies and PBMs, they fight back with a fury. And in this case, OptumRx, which is the largest PBM, it's owned by United Health, their business partner, AARP, went out and beat the drum and said, this is horrible, you have to stop this proposal. And they were able to mobilize seniors against their own interest and stop that proposal. And so I would love to see that come back. I do think that's a way we could give a lot of relief at the register for prescription drugs. But a lot of these things like the Pelosi plan or these reimportation proposals, they're very dangerous, because they would undermine the incentive to develop new cures.
Also, it seems like it's just an enormous Gordian knot. And it seems like there are forces who wish to complicate the knot, right?
Yeah.
Which is what the Pelosi plan would do.
The Pelosi plan is basically like, we're just going to have politicians and bureaucrats set the prices. That's very dangerous. And by the way, it's crazy. You've got these insurance companies that are supporting the Pelosi plan because they think, hey, government will set the prices and then we'll make more money because we're paying less for drugs. It's like, how short-sighted are you people? You think that Democrats are going to let the insurance companies benefit after they have government take over the pharmaceutical pricing? No, they're going to turn around and eliminate them next. I mean, they've got every one of their candidates for president wants to have a totally socialized healthcare system. They want to ban private insurance, and yet the insurance companies are supporting nationalization of pharmaceutical pricing. It's incredibly short-sighted.
But Phil, they supported Obamacare.
Yeah, well, yeah, they cut their deal and then they supported it. You're absolutely right.
So it's so
I know that's the one thing when if it didn't have this terrible negative effect on R&D and new cures that I think are going to be so important for our health and our children, our future, I would be like, you know what, pharma's getting what they deserve.
Right.
For supporting Obamacare, getting us that. I have little sympathy for them kind of as an industry, but unfortunately, I do think that they're right in fighting these proposals. So
can't live without them, can't shoot them.
Yeah.
Or something like that. All right, Phil Kerpen, thank you so much for coming on the program. It's good to see you.
My pleasure. Have a good one, Sam.
Okay. Wow. So just so you know, the big takeaway is this idea that the Democrats have to somehow level off drug pricing is absurd in the highest. It's awful, actually. All right. So quickly, I want to read the rest of this thread that I was reading to you by @FondOfBeatles, who is a doctor who is trying to debunk this claim that is used to justify the inclusion of trans women in female sports. And the claim is that at a certain point, all of the advantageous effects of the male hormone stuff goes away. And going back to common sense, very clearly not. In fact, there's a player now who is 6'8", and I think it's basketball, and he just dominates because he's got the height. And you're like, well, there are women who are 6'8". Yeah, not so much. So you can't say that his height is now sort of neutralized because he's a female. Anyway, so this doctor is making this point that if you take a female athlete who enhanced her who doped up to enhance her performance, right? And then, and she managed to enhance her performance by a full second, say. And, in some of these things in the races, in the short races, certainly the seconds count a lot, but hundredths of seconds count. So by the time that the Olympics come around, she's no longer doping. Her pee is purer than holy water, and she runs a good race, and she comes in 8th. So she gets a bit of fame. She dines out on her success, and depending on the country of her birth, she becomes a national treasure, right? But what happens when they discover her doping history? What happened with Lance Armstrong when they discovered his doping history? Boom, he's out. Disgrace, right? The guy survived testicular cancer and still won the Tour de France like several times. But once we found out that he was doping, it's like, no. And we didn't even care when he was doping. The assumption is the doping helped him, and that's cheating. And so her point is basically the male hormones that produced the male part of this transgender woman. And I know that we're supposed to maybe stop using the adjective transgender, but I have to differentiate the formerly male woman, right? The hormones that helped him become an adult, and you can't argue that he's not an adult, but those hormones, they contributed at a certain point. And therefore, they can be seen as if basically he was doping before and then he stopped doping, and he even took some drugs to sort of reverse the doping. But the question is, can he actually adequately reverse the doping? And the answer is no. The trans might get a free pass because they're not winning. The same argument does not apply to the doping female. We know it doesn't matter that she doesn't win. It's a head start. And that's where it counts. It's not the final placement that we look at. It's that it's unfair. So the trans gets a free pass because they didn't mean to cheat. They were born that way. The national policies are all clear that the lack of intent is no defense. If you're found to have taken a banned substance, my trainer slipped it to me. Doesn't matter. If it's a banned substance that is meant to enhance athletic performance, that does enhance athletic performance, that's the bottom line. So it doesn't matter if you intended, or indeed whether your performance actually was enhanced. It doesn't matter. If there's a substance that could have enhanced your performance that was at any time present in your body, you're out. And so the question is, why do the trans people get a pass when we're talking about similar substances? A head start is not available to your competitors. A head start that is not available to your competitors is clearly an unfair advantage. So the trans athlete has had, just like the doping female, a head start on the remainder of the field, a potential for an extra second, a potential that wasn't available to the others. Or are we just not going to draw any lines? And by the way, this will ruin female sports. Okay, so I want to talk about forgiveness. This is there's a theme in my life these days that has to do with forgiveness, because I see our culture losing our capacity to forgive, even the impetus to forgive. And of course, with the emphasis goes the capacity, right? They go hand in hand. Before I talk about that, CBD oils are available at mojo50.com/shop. They are the highest strength tincture. They're clinically tested, they're physician endorsed, and you'll get the best price per milligram for clean, full spectrum CBD. Go to mojo50.com/shop. If you're listening to my show on mojo50.com, just hop on over to the shop. Get yourself some CBD oils. They help with sleeping, aches and pains, seizures, and inflammation. I know they work for me. mojo50.com/shop. Give it a try today. Okay. So there's the story about this former police officer who went into the wrong apartment. Saw a guy, he was actually just sitting on his couch having some ice cream. and she shot him because she thought that he was an intruder. She was mistaken, clearly. And she was just convicted. But this is the most amazing story. It was in Texas, in Dallas on Wednesday. And so I have the audio for you. It's hard for me to play this because it's going to make me cry. It had me sobbing this morning when I saw it. And I'll explain a little bit more in just a minute. But let me play you the clip. This is the brother of the young man who was shot by the woman, the former police officer woman, Amber Geiger. The name of the young man is Botham. The name of the young man who was shot is Botham. His brother is named Brandt. And he says, like my brother did, but what he means is that his brother died, not that his brother would have wished. Okay, so when you hear this, don't be confused by that. I was confused initially, but that's not what he meant. So, okay, just here it is. So he's hugging her. She walked into his arms very quickly. The judge, of course, said yes, go ahead. It took her a minute, but the entire courtroom is in tears. You can hear it. Mason Weaver texted me this morning. If you don't know Mason's story, he's got an incredible story. And he texted me this morning the video from this. I'm sure that it just bowled him over. And there is actually a great video online telling his story, which is similar. It goes along these lines. Botham Jean's brother hugged the white female cop who was convicted of murdering his brother. This set off a stream of anger from liberals over this act of forgiveness. Some ask, why should a black man forgive this racist cop? I am a black man. Forgiveness is not for the victim. It's for the survivors. The anger, frustration, fear, and revenge is harmful. That sense of vengeance, that sense of righteous dignity. He says, a white racist tried to kill me and left me permanently disabled. And this is how I responded. And he sent me the video, which I've seen. It's a brilliant video. It's done very well. Called The Power of Forgiveness. Forgiveness is not, it's not about the other person. It's about you. You are called to forgive. Why? Because you're going to need forgiveness. We all are going to need forgiveness. And if we don't learn how to forgive other people, we will never experience forgiveness. Because you can't experience it if you can't give it. And I believe that we are now steeped in this culture of non-forgiveness. So I was jogging this morning. And there's a long stretch of road near me. I like to jog in houses and communities, but I jog through this community, and then to get home, there's a long stretch of road, and it's completely vacant. It's 2 lanes, one going one way, one coming the other way, just 2 lanes. And then off the road, there's a concrete sidewalk. Well, I jog on the road because the road is asphalt, And at the side of the road, there is a white strip of sort of rubberized paint. So it's rubber. So I jog the rub fault, right? It's sort of rubberized asphalt. And I jog on that because the concrete is really hard on your spine and on your feet. And it's hard enough jogging as it is. And so I was jogging this morning, and there was a car coming toward me. He was the only car on the road. It was a long stretch of road. We were sort of in the middle. So there was plenty of room. He could see a mile, maybe not a mile. He could see a full half mile of roadway. There was not another car in sight. And he veered to hit me. I jumped off the road onto the curb because he very clearly veered so as to hit me. He took out the white line. And of course I jumped off the road because I'm not an idiot. But I looked at him like, what's that about? There were 2 other cars that came during that time. By the way, not a busy road. Not at all a busy road. I'm not an idiot. 2 other cars came. They both veered away, gave me like 5 feet of space because there's a whole other lane there that's, yes, it's going the other way, but it doesn't matter because there are no cars on the road. That's unforgiveness. That's like, you're on my road. He doesn't own the road. It's not his road. It's everybody's road. Why are you jogging on the road? I'm driving here. That's unforgiveness. Let's be gracious to people. Did he stop to think why I might be driving on the road? I explained it to you because it's important to know. I'm not jogging on the sidewalk because there are people walking on the sidewalk, which there were. But you can jog around people. But he actually veered in a car in an effort to hit me. All right. Breathe. Combat flip-flops. Go to combatflipflops.com. Use my promo code SAM25. Save 25% at combatflipflops.com. Business, not bullets. They're flipping the view on how wars are won. Combatflipflops.com. This is the Sam Sorbo Show. Thank you for listening. Enjoy the rest of your day. I forgot to do that. Okay. Well, thank you, YouTube audience, for listening. I'm going to get the hang of this stuff in a little bit. I'm glad I didn't have any weird messages up on my screen. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm getting the hang of it, and it's a lot of fun, frankly. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Bye.